The readings this morning speak to us about marriage and a plan, a divine plan for marriage. The book of Genesis tells the story of creation of woman as a partner for man, and the plan that two complementary beings would become one. And Jesus in the gospel affirms this plan and adds that what God has joined, we must not divide. It is our church's understanding of marriage. And just as that plan is contested by many today, it was contested by the children of Israel, and in a particular way by the Pharisees. In today's gospel, they question the permanence of marriage. They ask if it is lawful for a man to divorce his wife. And the question is a loaded one because King Herod had just married his brother's wife, and because there was deep division among the Jewish rabbis concerning marriage and divorce. The Jews held marriage in high esteem. For them, it reflected the covenant that God had made with them, with his chosen people. And yet, as is often the case, practice fell very short of the ideal, and divorce by the time of Jesus was common. And the Pharisees quote Moses from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. If a man takes a wife, and after they are married, she is unpleasing to him because of some indecency, let him give her a statement in writing and send her away from his house. And when she has gone away from him, she may become another man's wife. The Pharisees were divided into different schools. They disagreed among themselves about what some indecency might mean. What was it that could justify divorce? The conservative school of Rabbi Shammai said that indecency meant adultery. Only in the case of adultery could a man divorce his wife. And the more liberal school of Rabbi Hillel held that if a woman annoyed her husband, he could divorce her. A burnt supper, a few extra pounds, too much starch in the shirt, all these were grounds for divorce. And the even more liberal school of Rabbi Akiba said that a woman did not have to be guilty of anything. If a man simply fancied another person's wife, that was reason enough for divorce. Human nature being what it is, people looked for what was easy rather than for what was right. And so divorce for any reason had become common. And so the Pharisees asked Jesus to weigh in on this question that everyone was talking about in order to trap him, we're told. His answer will either get him in trouble with King Herod or will alienate him from one or all of the schools of thought that were current at the time. But Jesus uses the question for his own purpose, and that is to reaffirm the plan of God for marriage, to reaffirm the sanctity of marriage. Jesus tells us that marriage is not a human invention, but a divine creation. From the beginning, God had a plan. Jesus used the question to not only challenge the status quo, but to challenge how the Jews of his day saw marriage itself. Jesus challenges a culture that had made of marriage something much less than what God had intended. And so Jesus takes us back to the beginning, back to the book of Genesis, and reveals the mind and the heart of God. From the beginning of creation, he said, God created them. Male and female, he created them, and ordained husband and wife to live in unity. Jesus tells the Pharisees that Moses allowed a man to write a decree of divorce, not because it was God's will, but rather because of the hardness of men's hearts. Many people tried to justify divorce as part of God's plan, but Jesus clearly does not. And in this divine pedagogy, Jesus gets the final word. God had a plan for marriage, an institution willed by God. And in that institution, a man leaves his father and mother, is joined to his wife, and the two become one. And what God has joined, we must not separate. This is Jesus' teaching, and therefore it is our church's teaching. We fall short, we fail, and with humility we can come before a merciful God and admit that we fall short, that we fail. But what we cannot do is what many today pretend to do. We cannot rewrite the plan. What we cannot do is to pretend that we know better than God, and yet that is exactly what we do. You know, at the heart of every sin is the sin of pride. It was original sin. Adam and Eve pretended to know better than God. And today, many, including our Supreme Court justices, pretend just that. In these last months, a divinely willed institution has been redefined by man. 13 years ago, in defending the so-called right to abortion, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote these astonishing words: "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence. of meaning, of the universe, and the mystery of human life. Justice Anthony Kennedy opened the door not only to relativism, but to relativism on steroids. We as human beings have the right to define existence itself. This relativism that Justice Kennedy would support and does support is a relativism that Pope Benedict warned us against on the eve of his election as Pope not many years ago. Relativism would argue that there are no absolutes in life. There is nothing that is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. Reality is whatever we want to make it. It is exactly what Justice Kennedy used to defend the killing of a child in the mother's womb. Murder in the eyes of one is an enlightened choice in the eyes of another. Reality, according to Justice Kennedy, is whatever we would make it. There is nothing that is absolutely right and nothing that is absolutely wrong. This same reasoning was used by the same Justice Kennedy who wrote the Supreme Court's majority opinion in redefining marriage. Marriage is whatever two people want it to be. And certainly the last word has not yet been spoken. If gender is not intrinsic to marriage, number and age will also soon be judged to be relative as well. The end result of relativism is a world in which there are no absolutes. And the end result of relativism is a world in which there is no God, who is the ultimate absolute. And as we look at our country and the direction of our country today, we see how firmly rooted this relativism has become. Certainly with the legalization of abortion in 1973, our country began its journey toward a secular society in which God is confined to the sacristies of our churches. People of faith, we are told, are free to believe whatever we want to believe, as long as it makes no real impact on our lives and how we live our lives. I think they call that schizophrenia. At the time of Jesus, too, as it was at the time of Jesus, so too today, we as people must make a choice. The value that we place on all human life, our understanding of marriage as an institution, are they absolutes, or are they whatever we want them to be? Does a child's life have value simply because one set of parents places value on that life and another set of parents does not? Or does a child's life have intrinsic value from the moment of conception? Are there absolutes in life? Or are we, as Justice Kennedy would have us believe, free to define our own existence and its meaning? There is no doubt that Justice Kennedy's relativism is the new order of our day. But I just might ask, if a world without God, if a world in which everything, including the value placed on human life and the meaning of an institution like marriage, are relative, why do 73% of Americans polled today believe that our country is headed in the wrong direction? Maybe, just maybe, relativism on steroids is not the panacea that some would have us believe. Maybe, just maybe, there are some absolutes in life.